If you've ever looked at your marriage and thought, maybe if I was just more patient, if I was just more kind, if I was less reactive, then things would be going better in our marriage. This episode is for you. We are talking about what does it look like when you feel like you're not enough in your marriage. Maybe I'm too emotional. I'm too needy. I need to like dim myself a little bit. I know I've had that thought because if it seems like who you are is upsetting your spouse, then you start to internalize that and make it about you, instead of the many other things that could be going on, which we'll talk about, like what's going on deeper, what may be behind why you're going to immediately like I'm the problem. But thinking these thoughts like I'm too needy or I should be a better husband, I should be less reactive, those are some of the ways that it looks,
Absolutely.
in your marriage.
And so many guys struggle with this one. I feel like I'm not good enough in my marriage. We look at the performance and we're trying to people please with our wife. We're trying to shape shift and do whatever we can so that she's happy. That can really become this thought, well, I'm not good enough then because she's not happy in this relationship or she's having these big emotions or whatever. And then we can reflect back on ourselves and say, well, see, look, I can't ever perform good enough to have my wife be happy with me. If I'm not doing a good enough job, if I'm not getting praise, if I'm not living up to this standard that I feel I need to be at in my marriage, if I'm not being the best husband I can possibly be, then there's something wrong with me, and I'm not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, both husbands and wives can struggle with this a lot, and you can struggle with it in all different areas of your life. I mean, I know for me, it stemmed from childhood wounds that I had, where I felt that I had to be perfect to be safe in my family. Otherwise, I felt in danger, right? I felt there was going to be punishment. There was going to be just a very unsafe atmosphere if I made a mistake. And so, the little girl in me is like trying so hard to do her best to be good all the time and to really be perfect. She really thought she had to be perfect. And it took me many, many, many years to heal that. And in the meantime, it was showing up in me trying to have a perfect body, me trying to be the perfect student, me trying to be perfectly athletic, all these things. I'm trying to be good enough. And it stemmed from other things in childhood as well. And that is where a lot of times the deeper area where this comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me too, in my childhood, just a lot of that religious messaging again too, where, like a good person does this, and so you're constantly trying to be good, and you're being praised for being good, and you're being punished for being bad, and parents do their best to raise kids, and there's nothing wrong with some of that, but you can develop this idea that my performance is how I receive love, how I receive acceptance. And so if I perform very well, then I get praised, then I get acceptance. And if I don't perform well, then I lose out on some of that. And that can set you up for a whole life where you're just trying to perform constantly for this acceptance.
Yeah.
And that then translates into marriage really heavily because you're performing for acceptance in the relationship. And that isn't what it's about.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I've been sensitive to this topic because of just the experiences Adam and I have had growing up and how it has shown itself in our lives now and in our marriage. And I want to create a different atmosphere for my kids as a mom. And you see this messaging out there, I'm more sensitive to it now because I'm paying attention to that. But I just saw in a Christian, like, it was like a trailer for this app or whatever, and they were talking about how your number one goal as a parent is for your kids to be more like Jesus. And for us, that's really not our goal. Our kids are never going to be perfect like Jesus, but our number one goal is for our kids to be loved, for them to know how much they're loved by God and how to know how much they're loved by us.
And the funny thing is that the more they experience and understand the love of God and us reflecting that love to them, the more they're naturally going to show up in a way that's more Christ-like, because there'll be an outflow of their love for God. They will feel so accepted and so loved by Him, and so full of His love for them, and knowing that they're saved and knowing that they're forgiven and able to live out. It just naturally happens, just like a tree and its fruit, like how God talks about that. Like the tree just naturally produces these fruits of faith.
Well, and that really comes from relationship, right? Like when
Yeah.
you're in relationship with God and you have this relationship with the Holy Spirit, you are naturally just exhibiting those fruits. And we're kind of going off on a tangent here, but I think it's important to discuss this, especially when you're talking about marriage, because a lot of times we don't even recognize in ourselves where we're feeling not good enough, where we're trying to be good enough all the time, and we don't recognize that maybe that's where it's coming from.
And I think this does happen, like in marriage circle. I mean, in our work with couples too. Sometimes couples are asking for things to do, like ways to perform in order to fix the marriage. Like the marriage is broken, we're going to fix it, and we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and it's all about performance. And I understand why people come with that kind of thinking and that kind of hope and expectation. But really, what needs to happen is a lot of healing and a lot of love and a lot of like understanding the acceptance and the love from God, and the love that we have in our marriage, and that sort of thing will actually do more to heal the marriage than to just have a list of to-dos that you're then trying to perform in order to be good enough in the marriage and to make your marriage good enough and more acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's when you start to just see and you start to like think back on like, yeah, how was I raised? It starts to make sense. Another one that comes up often from childhood is like, maybe your emotional needs were dismissed. Or they were minimized, like stop crying, right? Like this isn't that big of a deal. Just, get over it. There was no space for you to have emotions other than like happy, And so you didn't understand how to even really take care of that part of you, which is a really important part of you, right? Your emotional part of you. It's very
part of your performance was to suppress certain emotions. Part of your performance, part of your being good enough, was to deny your actual true feelings in certain areas and to suppress them and make sure that you showed up and performed in the proper or the best emotional state.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you learned that love had to be earned in whatever way, right, you're going to carry that into your marriage. And that's why it's so important to kind of go back to and reflect on what did I learn when I was younger, right? These are formative beliefs that you then carry into your marriage. And it is really important. And we kind of touched on it a little bit too, but there's also like this church or cultural conditioning that a lot of us experienced where, it's like maybe you heard like good Christian wives, they respect their husbands and they submit. And you maybe got some misinterpreted messages with that where you felt like, oh, wives should just kind of disappear, right? We shouldn't actually speak up when there's a truth that needs to be heard because that's not respectful, that's not submitting or whatever, right? And you're trying to be that good wife. You're trying to appear and behave in a certain way because you think that is somehow going to make you feel better about yourself, right? You're kind of missing who you are.
And for men too, I mean, like the whole men have to be strong all the time. Men have to lead. And that's all good stuff, of course. But if that's performative, if it's like, okay, well, I just have to buck up and I have to be strong and I'm going to have to deny parts of who I am or whatever in order to be strong or to pretend that I'm strong in this moment, all that does is really just suppress those things again. And it's not healthy. Whereas again, if you really you get back to the root of who you are in Christ, then a strength grows from that. A strength grows from your identity as a man of God, and with that, reclaimed identity that's so deep and true to your core, then you can lead in a stronger way. You just naturally are going to because you're living more authentically as God made you to be.
Yeah, and then some of the I'm not good enough in my marriage can come from your own marriage trauma, right? Where maybe there was betrayal and you felt like, well, if I was someone different, then they wouldn't have betrayed me in that way, right? Or maybe it's emotional neglect and you feel like you don't matter in the marriage, feeling unseen, unheard. Maybe it's criticism where your spouse is criticizing you. And so that voice is just kind of affirming what you maybe already believed about yourself, or these little whispers that were there of I'm not good enough. And then the criticism comes in and it just feeds that. I know we both have experienced that. It's sad, but it's understandable when you're in this very close relationship and you do have the opportunity either to build up so beautifully, or unfortunately you have the opportunity to tear down. Because you are so close, because you are one, and you speak into each other's lives in so many ways. And so unfortunately often we are using our words in a careless way. We don't see the effects right away. We maybe are just reacting, and we don't necessarily see the impact of what that criticism or what emotionally neglecting our spouse is doing. But it really is so powerful. And chronic disconnection, even right in your marriage, when you're feeling disconnected for so long, I mean, that can really start to get in your head and feed these lies of like, if only I was this, if I was that, right? If
It must not be enough because we just can never connect. Like you bear this responsibility then for the state of the marriage, and you're like, okay, well, I must not be good enough. We're just not good at marriage. I'm not good at marriage. I'm not because we aren't connecting, and we're constantly having these disconnections and these arguments and things like that. And
so sometimes we go into these self-protective patterns where we're like, well, then I'll just be easy to love, right? So that I'm not abandoned. If we're afraid of maybe it's their criticism, and so I'll just be good enough so that they won't criticize me. Or maybe yeah, they leave you when you're needing them, and so you're like, well, I'll just perform, in this way. I'll be easy to love so that they won't leave me, or whatever it is, right? But you can see how we we are, our brain is choosing these thoughts for a reason, right? And sometimes it's for self-protection too. And so yeah, how it shows up in the marriage.
Yeah, it shows up in a lot of different ways. I mean, we've kind of even touched on some of them, but like the people pleasing thing, definitely. If there's a lot of people pleasing going on, usually it's because somebody doesn't feel good enough.
Well, yeah, notice that in yourself, right? If
Right.
you are people pleasing,
Yeah.
if you find yourself always trying to accommodate, losing your own voice, not sharing truth when it needs to be shared, that's probably because you are feeling not good enough, right? And so asking yourself, what's behind that? Why am I showing up that way? That could be really helpful.
Yeah, over functioning is another one. You're trying to do whatever you can again to make sure that the other person's okay, fix everything in the relationship, and I'm going to make sure that that this all is working the way it should. And you take on this huge responsibility and you really start to function like it's all up to you to fix and heal and change everything. You're actually trying to perform, and you're never going to get that perfect.
Yeah, I mean, if your goal is to be perfect, which I know it might be so deep in your belief system, right? But if that's your goal, you're always going to be disappointed with yourself, right? You're always going to be talking to yourself in a negative way. And that's so unhealthy for yourself. It's so unhealthy for your relationships, but it's also so out of alignment with how God sees you. And it's exhausting.
So much of it is this negative self-talk that you're doing inside of yourself. Like, and I know that was me for years. And that is, like always something that we all have to take stock of and understand, well, how am I speaking to myself? Am I speaking to myself the way God would speak to me, who loves me and cares for me and did all the, or am I speaking to myself out of judgment and accusation and blame and just like whipping myself on with my own self-talk? That you're never going to be good enough when you're whipping yourself along trying to be perfect. You're going to have this feeling of never enough. And it's going to be such a depressing place to stay.
It's to be quite honest, it's kind of like verbally abusing yourself.
Yeah, it is.
Right? You're really kind of abusing yourself, and that's really painful. And then it's easy to then blame, right? You're the one who's judging yourself, accusing yourself, but then it's like the minute someone else kind of adds a little thing even, then it's like, oh, it's them. They're the ones making me feel that way. When really, a lot of the time, it's you choosing these judgments and these thoughts about yourself that are so painful.
Yeah, and then you're projecting those judgments onto your spouse, your spouse, as if they are saying the same things to you. It's because they're that little thing that they said had this huge landing pad in your own heart, because of what you were already saying to yourself. You'd already prepared the ground so much that as soon as they say just the littlest thing that's agreeing with what you're already saying to yourself, then you jump all over that and you get really upset, really defensive, really accusatory.
Yeah, I know. One of the big realization that I've had is I have exhausted myself trying to be everything, right? Trying to do all the things and be such a great wife or mother or whatever. But it's because I'm terrified of being nothing. And that's why I'm trying to be everything, because I'm terrified of being nothing. And when I face that belief that I have, that fear that I have, when I face that, that's the first step to healing. First of all, that's not how God designed us, right? To just be exhausted from trying to do. We're not capable of doing that, and that's not who He created us to be either, right? We're human beings. We were made to be, and part of that being is to know who we are, who we really are, what is our true identity.
Yeah.
And so that's the next step, right? After the realization, it's like, then to ask yourself, what is true, right? What does God say? You don't have to prove yourself to God. You don't have to try to earn His love, earn his affection, earn His attention. He already perfectly loves you,
Yeah.
and cherishes you just for who you are.
I mean, Christ went to the cross and back, for us already. Like before we did anything, before we lifted a finger, before we before we performed anything at all, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And then He rose for us. God did it all for us. And when He died on the cross, He said, "It is paid in full. It is done." And so when we disagree with that and try to do, and try to perform, and almost try to earn our identity, we're really, outside of who He says we are.
Yeah, we don't have to, perform our way to peace. If you're feeling that kind of angst in your spirit, and you don't have to perform your way there. You get to receive healing, right? That is a gift from God. Receive His healing. You don't have to achieve it. And so, start to ask yourself, like, who am I? And listen to God's voice. Recognize the difference between God's voice and the lies, right? You are fearfully and wonderfully made. God says you are chosen, you are holy, you are dearly loved. These are all things that God says about you.
There are so many truths in His Word that inform who you are, and you can go to like all these different passages that really inform you of what your true identity in Him is. And that is so powerful, and it is so healing, and there's nothing we do to earn that. That is just what we're given. His love isn't something that we have to perform for. It is just given to us. It is ours as a gift.
I know sometimes when I'm having a rough day, or like something comes up, and maybe there's like these underlying beliefs still that are not fully healed or whatever, and someone pokes at that, and I can kind of start to spiral. It's very helpful for me to just take some time to be with God and just ask Him, like, who do you say I am? Because what He says to me is so beautiful. It's so cool. I love it. I journal it out so I can go back and read. It's so beautiful. God's voice is always beautiful. You can recognize it because it's so life-giving. It's so loving. It's the opposite of these lies that we sometimes get stuck in and we spiral in. And so a good question to ask yourself, if you feel like you're performing instead of just belonging, is, what do I believe I have to do in order to be loved? Just ask yourself that and really reflect on that. Like, what really comes up for you when you ask that question? And then replace that with the truth, right? Replace that with the truth. And you're going to do it over and over and over and over again, right? This isn't just like a one and done thing.
It is just a practice to constantly remind ourselves who we really are. what God really says about her.
It's just part of your journey with Christ, right? Your journey. And as you go through your days, you're talking to Him, you're being reminded, just like with your spouse, you don't just tell them that you love them once, you tell them that you love them over and over. And it's a journey. You walk through it together. You affirm them, speak life to them. It's the same kind of thing. It's just this relationship. It's not, I got to do this. Okay, put that on the to-do list, talk to God and fix my identity or whatever. This is not a to do. This is just your part of your natural relationship, part of you being, right? You belonging to Him and just getting to enjoy that. It can also be really helpful to reconnect with your body and your emotions,
That is huge.
and as you're identifying, like, oh man, I'm there's a lot of lies in my head today. Like, I'm really feeling hurt. I'm feeling disappointed. I'm feeling, discouraged, whatever. Bring up what that emotion is. Allow yourself to feel it. Practice some breath work, calm your nervous system down, or just speak kindly to yourself, right? As you're reconnecting with your body, you're saying, like, man, I mean, I don't know about you, but I talk to myself a lot, and I think it's okay.
It can be very healthy to talk to yourself.
So don't be afraid to talk to yourself and, like, man, I can see that you're hurting today, Cara. Like, I care about you. I love you. Even when you're hurting, I love you, and you matter to me. And just
because you can agree with the voice of God. Like,
absolutely,
you can agree with the voice of God and speak it over yourself as well. This is how God actually sees me, and I see myself that way too. If it starts to heal that when you actually reverse that and you agree with what God is already saying over you.
Another helpful thing is to join a safe community, right? Surround yourself with people who are bringing truth, who are bringing that truth. They're bringing that love. They're building you up. This is the kind of stuff that we work on in my Restored membership for wives. We are encouraging each other. We are speaking truth. We are speaking life and loving each other and walking through some of these things. When the lies come up, it's a safe space to talk about it and get encouraged. It is really a beautiful community, and the link is in the show notes. If you're looking for that, if you're like, yeah, I'm struggling in my marriage, I'm feeling really low, I'm feeling bombarded by these lies, then reach out. It's so powerful when you surround yourself with others who really can be a safe community for you and walk with you in that healing journey. We're not meant to walk through this alone.
No. The more voices you have around yourself speaking truth into your situation and your life in a very real and raw way, I mean, that only can speed up the healing process because you're just getting all this other support around yourself, and they're all speaking those truths into your heart as well, and it's very powerful. And I'm working on developing a men's group as well. And that is going to be part of that too, because we struggle so much with our identity, and we struggle with some of these very same things where it is so performance based, and men especially do struggle with that. Trying to perform for acceptance, trying to perform for love, trying to perform to be good enough in marriage, in life, at the workplace, and all these things. And a lot of men are isolated and feeling lonely in that. And we need powerful male voices in our lives speaking these truths to us as well, and agreeing with what God is already saying to us, so that our identity can be rooted in Christ and what He's done for us.
Yeah, so if this episode was helpful to you, which we really pray that it was, we would love it if you would share it in your stories, share it online, share it with a friend, with your spouse. Use it to encourage each other, and we'd love to hear your feedback as well. Feel free to send us a message, or let us know if there are other things that you were really wanting help with. We'd love to speak about those on the podcast in the future.